Boker Tov, everyone. Welcome to the Aliyah Day. I am glad to be with you. It is a cold and crisp morning here in North Texas, and Baruch Hashem, glad to be here. It is actually the 5th day of the week, but yesterday, I don't know, I was a day ahead of myself and ended up reading the 5th Aliyah, and so today we're going to read the 4th Aliyah because it makes perfect sense. We did the 5th Aliyah the 4th day and the 4th Aliyah on the 5th day today because we're so deeply spiritual that just like Jacob, when he crossed his hands to bless Manasseh and Ephraim, we're going to cross our hands to read the Aliyot on different days. How do you like that? Isn't that a very spiritual explanation? It's a way to go deep with things, right? Yeah. Aside from the fact it was just a human error, but then again, everything is controlled by Hashem. So even our mistakes, and this is actually a true thing, even our mistakes we view as errors and mistakes, if we give them over to Hashem, if we actually this is really a true thing, actually. If we even when we make mistakes, when we make teshuva and we give it over to Hashem, even our mistakes become part of His master plan. It's true. Because now, how can that happen from the human perspective? We're not even remotely close to being that smart. But God knows, because He sees the end from the beginning. So He saw your last day on earth before you were even born. He sees it all, and therefore He looks ahead and sees exactly what decisions we're going to make, and then He orchestrates everything accordingly. If we are giving it to Him and asking Him to help us, Baruch Hashem. So that's wonderful. And then, all right, so the 4th Aliyah. Today is the 9th of Tevet. Tomorrow is the 10th of Tevet. Tomorrow is actually a fast day. And I mentioned this when I did the video on Tevet. I mentioned about the 10th of Tevet as a fast day. It's the day that Nebuchadnezzar started to besiege Jerusalem, which would end up on Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, the destruction of the first temple. That all began on the 10th of Tevet, which makes the 10th of Tevet tomorrow from dawn until nightfall a fast day. And so this is one of the reasons why Tevet is considered a month of darkness. It's a month of darkness, which is why I said in our video we have to increase our spirituality. Because tomorrow's a fast day is another reason why we're having the Chinese movie and dinner night tonight. And the fact that tomorrow is the Erev, and that would have been basically a challenge. But normally we have the Chinese dinner and movie night on the 25th. But this year, the 25th is a fast day, and the 25th is an Erev Shabbat. And so therefore it makes life. Actually, it doesn't at all. It's just a fun movie. But we're going to watch it. All right, Baruch Hashem. It might have some spiritual undertones. I've actually never seen that particular Godzilla. So what do I know? Maybe we'll watch it and maybe there are spiritual undertones. I don't know. So chapter 45, the 4th Aliyah on the 5th day. Page 255. We're going to begin reading in verse 19. It says, "And you are commanded to say, do this, take for yourselves from the land of Mitzrayim, wagons for your small children and for your wives, transport your father and mother, and let your eye not take pity on your belongings, for the best of the land of Mitzrayim is yours." See, when God does a suddenly for us, as I talked to you yesterday, God's deliverance, and my experience with this, God's deliverance has always been a suddenly. It's always been a suddenly. You know, you go through something, you struggle, and then suddenly God provides. I told y'all before the testimony of how we ended up in this building. Basically, it was a suddenly. I mean, it seems like it didn't seem like we were without a place, desperate for a place to meet. And let me tell you something. For those of you who've never started a congregation before, not having a place to meet is a very big deal in our day and age. And so we didn't have a place to meet. And then 4 months later, we owned a building. It's amazing. And by the way, it was just right, just starting to kind of revitalize. And had we tried to buy this property today, or even last year, or perhaps the year before that, we probably couldn't afford it. But there was this little window of time that the property was affordable, and we were able to buy it. So just that testimony just shows that God's suddenly. So suddenly, and here are the family of Jacob. They're basically, for all intents and purposes, they're starving. They're having to go to Egypt. If things have gotten so bad, they had to go to Egypt and get grain. And so, now and Jacob is grieving because his son, his beloved son, is dead. Grieving now because Benjamin has had to go to Egypt, and he's very concerned about that. And now all of a sudden he learns that Joseph is alive. He learns that he's going to go to his new retirement community. There's a 55 and older retirement community in Upper Goshen. And it's so good there that his son, who's the viceroy of Egypt, basically he owns everything in Egypt, bill it to the viceroy. So it says, and let your eyes not take pity on your belongings. We read that verse 21. The sons of Israel did so. And Joseph gave them wagons by Pharaoh's word, and he gave them provisions for the journey. I want to say there's an insight that some of the legions of Egypt went up they went up with the brothers to get the father. I know that happened when it came time to bury Jacob. That Pharaoh commanded his entire army to go up with the viceroy to bury his father, which makes sense. You're not going to let the viceroy of Egypt wander around the empire without his legions. And there was insights where it said that Joseph himself had nearly 40,000 soldiers that were just his personal bodyguard. He gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of clothing. And to his father, he sent the following 10 he-donkeys laden with the best of Egypt, and 10 she-donkeys laden with grain, bread, and food for his father for the journey. And he sent off his brothers, and they went, and he said to them, do not become agitated on the way. In other words, he says to them, and this is something, another life lesson for us. Don't become agitated on the way. In other words, don't start fighting amongst yourselves, blaming each other. In fact, let's just read the explanation here, shall we? This is from the Chumash. It says, Rashi offers 3 interpretations of our passage. Number 1, do not become involved in halakhic discussions, lest the road become angry at you. A figurative expression meaning lest you become so engrossed that you lose your way. There's a spiritual message in that. All things in moderation, right? Halakha is important. It's important that we have a unified way of life. It is important that we do things according to community standards, not just our standards, but as standards that comport in general with all of Judaism. We don't want to make things up, reinvent the wheel. We see that just basically It just causes confusion at best. So it's important to have halacha, but it's also a warning not to get overindulgent in it, not to, just like it's okay to have a glass of wine, it's not okay to just consume bottles of wine in a single setting. You know, a glass or two or three or whatever is okay, but just to sit there and guzzle wine, that can be a problem. Or you could use the analogy for everything. A little bit of ice cream is okay. It's probably not a good idea to sit down and eat the entire half gallon. We need to find our identity in Hashem. And so don't get engrossed in halakhic discussions. Why? Lest you become angry. And then what happens? What's a figurative expression meaning what? That you lose your way. Isn't that interesting? You can become so focused on halakha. This is according to Rashi. You can become so focused on halakha that you can actually lose your way. Now explain that. Explain how you can be so focused allegedly on the mitzvot that you actually, which is the path. The mitzvot itself is a path to God, right? That's the Torah. It's a path. It's the path. You can become so focused on the mitzvot that you actually lose your way. Look at it this way. You could be so focused on the road itself that you actually lose your way. That's because we get our eyes off of what we're really trying to focus on, which is being like Hashem. And sometimes when we get so focused on halacha, we become what you call legalistic. And legalistic people are typically not people who operate in the gift of love or kindness or empathy or grace or mercy. Look at what we've said countless times about the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin is the greatest body of halakha that ever existed. The 71 judges that sat on the great Sanhedrin, halakhic masters. They knew the law backwards and forwards. They didn't need Google to look up a passage. They were just expert to judge with respect to mercy and compassion. So it's interesting, isn't it? All right, number B. What's the second interpretation of do not become agitated on the way? Do not be impatient on the journey, lest you travel too quickly or travel into the night before stopping to rest. Well, that hits home for me. I'm very much a point A to point B person when I travel. I like to get on the road and go. I don't like to stop. My family will tell you that. But it's not good. You need to stop and take a rest. What's the third interpretation? According to the plain sense of the passage, however, Joseph feared that the brothers would quarrel with each other and engage in mutual recrimination over who was responsible for selling him. He cautioned them, therefore, not to quarrel on the way. This is one of the most difficult things to do, because when we see the hand of God unfold in our lives and we see our mistakes turn into blessings and we see things turn out, we as a human condition, we want to play the blame game. We want to blame this one or blame that one, or be frustrated at this one or be frustrated at that one, find out who was right and who was wrong, and none of that stuff matters. And he's saying, look, don't be agitated on the way. I've already told you that it wasn't you who sent me here. Yes, in the eyes of men, I was betrayed by those who were closest to me. He's talking to his brothers. I was betrayed by those who were closest to me, my brothers. It wasn't fair. It was all jealousy. You guys were totally outside the plan, the will and the plan of God. Although you thought at the time, you thought you were inside the plan of God, but it turns out you were way outside. But don't let that bother you, because had you not been outside the plan of God at that time and done this evil thing, then I wouldn't be where I am right now to be able to save you. So don't get lifted up in pride. Don't start pointing the finger at each other. Just accept things for what they are. And many times in our lives, ladies and gentlemen, we go through things. Once we come to the point of teshuvah, then all of these things that happen to us and we did to other people and blah, 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 all of that comes into God's perfect plan. And once we see God's perfect plan unfold, it is not healthy or helpful for us to start blaming and pointing the finger. We need to simply learn from what happened, what we did, what they did, whatever, and then move forward in that. And don't get agitated on the way, because it's not helpful. They went up from Egypt and came to the land of Canaan to Jacob their father. And they told him, saying, Joseph is still alive, and that he is ruler over all the land of Egypt. But his heart rejected it, for he could not believe them. And that's amazing. We see lots of things like that, right? Where we say, I just can't believe it. However, when they related to him all the words that Joseph had spoken to them, and he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to transport them, then the spirit of his father, Jacob, was revived. Baruch Hashem. So it talks about the fact here that, sometimes we just can't believe what God is doing. I told you this week is the week of revelation, illumination, and it's 100%. That's what's happening. People's eyes are being opened this week. We should come to understand. So, looking at a few insights here from the Kehot Tumash, I want to look and see what it says here. A couple of highlighted points from the overview that I don't want to leave out. It says the parsha is called Vayigash. He approached is what it means. And it says this referring to how Judah approached Joseph. Remember in the opening of our parsha, we had that encounter of Judah approaching Joseph. So it says, in order to ensure success in our mission, we, as Josephs, must allow ourselves to be approached and complimented by Judah. So let's explore a little bit what that means. Judah personified the selfless aspiration to become absorbed in the presence of God. Judah represents the selfless aspiration to become absorbed in the presence of God. We have to allow ourselves to be immersed in God's presence. We have to allow ourselves to become one with Hashem. It says, as we've seen, the reason Jacob favored Joseph and his qualities over Judah and his qualities was because he understood that Joseph's qualities would provide the Jewish people with the abilities they would need to survive, flourish, and accomplish their goals during their long journey towards the messianic future. Once that ultimate goal is reached, however, it will no longer be necessary to give preeminence to Joseph and his approach. For Judah's selflessness will then be our dominant consciousness. This is why Judah is the direct ancestor of the Messiah. It is specifically his quality that will lead us out of the mindset of exile and into redemption. So what's this talking about Judah? That when we're in exile, we need to have a selfless attitude, and this attitude of being selfless is what's going to lead us out of the exile mentality and into redemption. What is the selfless attitude ultimately? It's love, kindness, not looking after our own interests. How often, ladies and gentlemen, do we do things or make decisions? We've talked about this all week long. Condemn other people, whatever, for our own self-interest, to advance our own ball. That on the surface, it seems like doing that is going to achieve the goal of exile, but in reality, it only keeps us in bondage. When we are selfless towards people and we ask Hashem to help us, help us do what it takes to advance their ball, so to speak, that's when we have true redemption in our lives. And then Hashem says to us, look, I'm fair. If you're trying to help somebody else and you're giving your effort to be selfless towards them, then I'm going to be selfless towards you and I'm going to help you. This is why the sages say that when you pray for somebody else, that you receive the blessing first. So in other words, it's like the person is a garden and Hashem is the spigot, the water spigot, and you're the water hose. So you hook the hose up to the spigot, you point it towards the garden, you start praying, the water starts flowing, the garden is getting the water. But what gets wet first? The garden hose. So the sages say when you pray for somebody else, you do it in the right spirit, do it in the right attitude, you do it with the right motive. You're just wanting to bless them. You're wanting God to bless them. You want to see transformation in their life. Then Hashem says, guess what? You're going to get watered first. But you have to have that, we have to have that selfless attitude. So this is what it means when it talks about we have to have the approach of, we have to be selfless people. We have to be people that love others, and that's what's going to lead us out of the exile. So looking back at some other insights here from Parasha Vayigash, going back to chapter 45 here, it says, behold, your eyes have seen. This is in chapter 45 and verse 12. Behold, your eyes have seen. It says, as for the proof that Joseph spoke the Lashon HaKodesh, it is meant, says Rabbi Chaim and others, in the sense that the brothers had not recognized Joseph's voice when he spoke Egyptian, when he spoke the Egyptian tongue. But as soon as he spoke Hebrew, all of a sudden they recognized his voice. This is one of the blessings of when we put Yeshua into a thoroughly Jewish context, then that's when God's people begin to recognize his voice. And when I say a thoroughly Jewish context, I mean just that, not a Christian context with a little sprinkling of Judaism, but in a thoroughly Jewish context. When we actually take Yeshua back to where he was originally. You know, the belief in the Messiah originally was a sect of Judaism. It was a Torah true sect of Judaism. It wasn't an entirely new religion. It was a sect of Judaism. It also says here in verse 4, come close to me if you please. Rashi explains, he saw that they were withdrawing. He said to himself, now my brothers are filled with shame. He spoke to them gently, appealing to them, and he showed them that he was circumcised. Bereshit Rabbah 93:8. Rashi later explains that Joseph resorted to the fact that he spoke Hebrew and was circumcised as double proof that he really was their brother. So when he saw that they were ashamed, when he saw that they were dumbfounded, when he saw that they were just beside themselves with grief, what did he do? Did he take that opportunity to spike the ball in their face? Did he take that opportunity to say, see, I told you so? Did he take the opportunity to pat his finger in their face and a bunch of, he looked at them, he saw that they were filled with shame, they were filled with regret, and he had compassion on them. The Zohar interprets this from a figurative sense. Slave had been elevated to them that he attributed his descent to having constantly respected the covenant of Abraham. That's what he was attributing his ascent to. So it says, and going to verse 15, an insight here, the verse 15, after his brothers converse with him, Rashi says, when they saw that he cried and that his heart was sincerely with them, his brothers spoke to him, for at first they were filled with shame before him. The Midrash Haggadah gives some more details. It says, when Joseph saw the shame of his brothers, he tried to calm them, saying, it is not you who have sent me here, but God. However, this argument did not succeed in ridding them of their feeling of shame. So he continued, you surely understand that I have no hatred in my heart for Benjamin, since he was not there when I was sold. In the same way, in my heart, there is no hatred for you. But this new argument did not convince them either. They're so filled with shame. They're so filled with regret and remorse. He's trying to comfort them. He's trying to calm them. Understand, as all of you do, I know, but it's just worth bearing in mind. Joseph had every reason in the world to hate his brothers. He had every reason in the world to want to cast them into prison and teach them a lesson. He had every reason in the world to want to put them through a little bit of anguish, just to give them a taste of what he's been through. But he didn't. His immediate response upon seeing his brothers was one of compassion, one of love. If you really think about it, why was Joseph able to have those feelings? Well, which would be true. One of the other reasons is just really kind of he knew that he was in the will of God. He knew that he was doing what God wanted him to do. He knew that where he was in life was truly of Hashem, and he was confident in that. He was comfortable in his own skin. So therefore, he was able to look at his brother, and have compassion on him because he felt like where he was in the right place. That God had put him there. And everything that ever happened to him, it wasn't really these people. It was Hashem orchestrating things so that he could get to where he needed to be in order to fulfill the mission of God. So therefore, he had compassion. And it's been my experience that so often that we're hateful towards people, or we're not compassionate towards them, or we're in somebody's business and mocking them, or whatever, or gossiping about them, or whatever the case. It's because we don't have. If we go off and do something because whatever reason, and we're not sure God is in it or not. God was kind of an afterthought. God, I'm going to do this. This is how it's going to go down. And then we're 3 steps into it before we go, I wonder if God is in this. And we just forget it and don't even care. And then we turn around and start mocking other people because we realize that our kingdom we have around us is just a kingdom that we built. It goes back to that idea of just a lack of self-confidence. We're not secure in our own self. We're not secure in our own relationship with Hashem. The reason that Joseph could express such empathy and such compassion to his brothers is because he was secure in his own relationship with Hashem. That's the bottom line. And when you and I are secure in our relationship with Hashem, that we really do love God, and our life is really sincere towards Him, then we can have compassion. It's amazing. Then we can have compassion. But when we're not secure, when our own life, this is actually, there's an insight to this in the Kehel Tumash. I want to say in the volume to the book of Numbers, but it talks about people that when they gossip about others and call them fakes and phonies, it's because in their own spiritual and mental life, they're a fake and a phony. Somebody says about you, you're just a fake, you're a fraud, you're a phony. And you get all riled up about that. You get all, and naturally, we get that would rile most people up. It hurts our feelings. And what we need to understand is the person who's saying that, the reason they're bad mouthing you and saying that is because they themselves are a fake and a phony and a fraud. and they're so insecure about the lie that's called their life that they project that on you. And the reason that Joseph is able to have such empathy with his brothers is because he's secure in knowing that he's in the plan of God. The problem with the brothers, the reason they're so filled with shame and not able to respond to that empathetic message is because they don't have that confidence. And rightly so. Rightly so, because they just realize that their entire life they've been living for 22 years. It says it in Rabbi Monk's commentary. He words it so beautifully. That whole big house of cards that they had built, all this halakhic principles, they had everything documented, all the halakhic reasons why it was okay to betray their brother unto death. They had it all down, just like the Jewish people had it all down with Yeshua. And they built up this big legal document. It was all wonderful and so, oh man, perfectly worded. And it all came crashing down in an instant, and they realized that their entire last 22 years has been a lie of self-delusion, that none of that halakhic stuff was true, that the reality of the matter was you're just jealous. You wanted the mantle of kingship, you didn't have it, and so therefore you betrayed your brother. And they're confronted with that, and they're not confident in their position with Hashem. And as a result, they're finding it difficult to receive his mercy. I don't know about you. To me, it's instructive. It's instructive to with respect to the gospel message. It's instructive to me with how we as humans interact with each other, about other people. But when it comes to on our own relationship with Hashem and not be focused on other people's relationship with Hashem. Because if our relationship with Hashem is true, if we really believe in the Mashiach and we really are holding tight to him and we really love him with all of our heart, then it'll help our interpersonal relationships, because otherwise we're so insecure, we have to condemn everybody. That's a miserable person. The secret to your health is to get in right relationship with Hashem vis-a-vis the atoning work of Yeshua HaMashiach. All right, I'm going to continue. I'm over my time, but let me finish this up. It says, but this new argument did not convince them either. So then Joseph said to them, how could you, my brothers, think that it would be in my power to do you harm? If 10 flames were not able to extinguish just one flame, listen to this commentary. This is so beautiful. If 10 flames were not able to extinguish just one flame. Listen, God, listen to me, ladies and gentlemen. Do not be concerned about wicked people, because there's only one being in the world that can extinguish your flame. Only one, and that's called Hashem. How can one flame extinguish 10? If 10 could not extinguish one, how could one extinguish 10? This argument then convinced them. And after these words and tearful embraces, they were finally able to speak freely with him. To be sure, the brothers who the Torah had previously told us could not speak peaceably to Joseph at the time of his dreams were incapable of any hypocrisy. Their character did not permit them to say anything which was in contradiction to their feelings. Well, thank you, Hashem. May it be God's will that he fills up the spirit of mercy and compassion. May it be God's will that we are able to cling to our Messiah and feel secure in our relationship with him. Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Look forward to seeing you tonight. Those of you who will be here for the Chinese dinner and movie night. And then tomorrow is a fast day. It begins at dawn, ends at nightfall. And then we have Erev Shabbat. We're going to have a big Erev Shabbat Seder here. We have some people coming in, so that's going to be exciting. And then, of course, we have Shabbat of that. But God willing, we'll be back. I'll be back in the morning for the back on track for the 6th and 7th Aliyah. I won't jump to the first day of the week. I think we'll save that for later. Baruch Hashem. Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Thanks for everything. Look forward to seeing you. Have a great day.